What if I told you one of the fastest guitarists in history played the most explosive set at Woodstock in front of 500,000 people, and then quietly disappeared from fame? No scandal, no breakdown, just silence. And that silence is what makes this story so strange. Because before the fall, there was a rise so fast it barely made sense. It starts in post-war England, Nottingham, Mansfield, grey skies, factory towns, not much going on. While most British teenagers in the early 1960s were chasing clean pop songs, two young musicians were going the opposite direction. Alvin Lee and Leo Lyons were obsessed with American blues and jazz. Not the popular stuff, the deep cuts. Artists like Big Bill Broonzy and Lonnie Johnson filled Alvin's house through his father's records. This wasn't just music you listened to, it was music you studied. Timing, phrasing, feel. If you didn't understand it, you couldn't fake it. And these two understood it early. They started playing under different names, moving through small venues, learning fast. First Ivan J and the J-Cats, then the Jaybirds. No hype, no shortcuts, just constant playing. Then came Hamburg, and this is where things get serious. In 1962, they landed a residency at the Star Club, same place where the Beatles had built their reputation. But the reality wasn't glamorous. Picture a cramped apartment above a mud wrestling club. No space, no privacy. One person on the toilet, another in the bath, someone else washing clothes in the same water. At one point, a local gangster fired a gas gun into the room just for entertainment. That was normal. But the real pressure was on stage. They played 45-minute sets with 15-minute breaks, 8 hours a night, every night. You weren't just performing, you were enduring. And that's where Alvin Lee changed. His speed wasn't planned. He didn't try to become fast, it just happened. Playing night after night, his hands adapted. The adrenaline took over. He even said later he tried to slow down, but once the music started, it just came out that way. By 1966, everything locked in. Alvin Lee on guitar and vocals, Leo Lyons on bass, Rick Lee on drums, Chick Churchill on keyboards. They had the lineup. Now they needed a name. They chose 10 Years After. It sounded simple, but it carried weight. A generation shaped by everything that came after the war. But here's the thing. At this point, they still weren't famous. In 1967, they signed a record deal and released their first album. It didn't explode. No hit singles. No instant success. But something more important happened. People who really understood music started paying attention. They became regulars at London's Marquee Club. And the crowd wasn't casual fans. It was musicians. People who knew exactly what they were hearing. 10 Years After wasn't a pop band. They were a musician's band. And across the ocean, in America, that kind of band was about to find its moment. By 1968, 10 Years After had built a strong reputation in the UK underground. But that didn't mean much if you wanted to truly break through. Because if you wanted to matter in rock music back then, you had to win over America. And unlike bands like the Beatles or the Rolling Stones, 10 Years After didn't have hit singles or radio support to carry them. They had to earn it the hard way. So they took a risk. In June 1968, they launched their first US tour, 7 weeks across the ballroom circuit, working with legendary promoter Bill Graham. This wasn't glamorous. No tour buses, no luxury hotels. They loaded their own gear, slept in cheap motels, drove through the night just to make the next show. And financially, it was a disaster. Alvin Lee later admitted they lost around $35,000 on that tour. For a band barely getting by, that kind of loss could have ended everything. But something unexpected was happening inside those venues. Night after night, they were winning people over. At places like the Fillmore East and Fillmore West, they built a reputation you couldn't buy with marketing. They became known as the band no one wanted to follow. Not because they were famous, because they were that good live. Promoters kept bringing them back, not for ticket sales, but because they delivered something rare. A performance that made the audience feel like they got more than they paid for. And here's where it gets wild. They were playing American blues, better than most American bands. Alvin later pointed out the irony. They had gone to what he considered the home of the blues, and people there hadn't even heard of many of the original artists. So, this British band was reintroducing American music back to America, and people loved it. Even other musicians took notice. Frank Zappa reportedly approached bassist Leo Lyons after a show, impressed by his stage presence, especially the way he shook his head during performances. Meanwhile, Alvin's guitar, nicknamed Big Red, was evolving. He modified it to handle louder stages, adding a pickup to cut through the noise. This wasn't about style, it was survival. In those venues, if your sound didn't cut through, you disappeared, and 10 years after, refused to disappear. Their albums started climbing the charts slowly. Not huge jumps, but steady progress. Stonehenge reached number 61 in the US and broke into the top 10 in the UK. It wasn't a massive success yet, but it was momentum. Every tour brought bigger crowds. Every show created more fans. And if you discovered them during this time, it felt like you were in on a secret. They weren't everywhere. You had to find them. They were a musician's band, respected for their skill, their speed, and the raw power of their live shows. And then came a moment no one could have predicted. August 1969, a muddy field in upstate New York, 500,000 people, and a performance that would change everything in just 9 minutes. August 17, 1969, the final night of Woodstock. By this point, the festival had already gone off the rails. Rain had turned the entire site into mud. Supplies were low, equipment was soaked. People were exhausted, but no one was leaving. Around 8:15 in the evening, 10 years after arrived by helicopter. From the air, Alvin Lee looked down at a sea of people stretching farther than he could see. 500,000 fans packed into one field. And then he noticed something strange. He later said there was a strong smell of marijuana rising from the crowd. Not something you forget easily. But once they landed, reality hit fast. The stage was soaked. The air was humid. Instruments wouldn't stay in tune. Organizers warned them not to play. The risk of electrocution was real. But Alvin didn't hesitate. He said, "If I die at Woodstock, we'll sell a lot of records." And just like that, they went on. The problems started immediately. They tried to open with Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, but had to restart multiple times because the guitars wouldn't stay in tune. There were no electronic tuners back then. Alvin had to tune everything by ear, on stage, in front of 500,000 people. And somehow, they pushed through. Then came the moment that changed everything. I'm going home. 9 minutes, that's all it took. 9 minutes of speed, precision, and energy that felt completely out of control, but somehow perfectly held together. Alvin's hands moved so fast, they almost didn't look real. The band locked in behind him, pushing the tempo higher and higher. And here's the part no one expected. The cameras were rolling. After struggling all weekend with weather and technical issues, the film crew managed to capture this performance perfectly. But there's one detail from that set that most people miss. Right before the final song, a young man from the crowd made his way through the mud, carrying a watermelon. It was one of the few things he had left. Instead of keeping it, he brought it to the stage and gave it to Alvin. During the performance, you can actually see it roll across the stage and hit his feet. Alvin picked it up, held it in the air, and carried it off. It sounds small, but it captured the entire spirit of Woodstock. People sharing whatever they had. Musicians giving everything back. For those 9 minutes, everything worked. The chaos, the weather, the crowd, the music. It all came together. And when the Woodstock film was released in 1970, that performance became one of its defining moments. Overnight, 10 years after went from a respected live band to global stars. Their album shot up the charts. New fans flooded in. Concert venues got bigger. Crowds got louder. Everything they had been working toward was finally happening. But what if I told you that moment, the one that made them famous, was also the beginning of the end? After Woodstock, everything moved fast. The film brought their performance to millions of people who hadn't been there. And every time that scene played, it created new fans. 10 years after wasn't just a live band anymore. They were stars. Their albums started climbing higher. Sish and Cricklewood Green pushed into the top charts. Then came A Space in Time, which went platinum in the United States. They They finally had what most bands chase for years: hit records, massive tours, sold-out arenas. They were headlining places like Madison Square Garden and the Los Angeles Forum. By 1971, they had already toured America 10 times. Everything looked perfect. But inside the band, things were changing. And here's where it gets complicated. The success they had worked for didn't feel the way they expected. The touring never stopped. Night after night, city after city, the same songs, the same expectations. Fans didn't want something new. They wanted the exact performance they saw in Woodstock, especially one song, "I'm Going Home." It had to sound the same every time.
Baby, don't go. Baby, don't go. Baby, don't go.
Same speed, same energy, same solo. What used to be improvisation turned into repetition. Alvin started to feel it. He had grown up loving blues, subtle playing, feeling every note. But now, he was known as the fastest guitarist in rock. And that label stuck. Audiences didn't want slow blues. They wanted speed. They wanted spectacle. He later said the solos stopped being jams and started becoming routines, like a jukebox. And that wasn't what he wanted. But wait, this next part makes it even worse. Their biggest hit came right in the middle of all this. "I'd Love to Change the World." Released in 1971, it became their most recognizable song. More melodic, more accessible. It reached a much wider audience, but Alvin didn't even like playing it live. The song required switching between acoustic and electric guitar, which made it harder to perform on stage. And more importantly, it didn't reflect the blues style he cared about. So the song that brought them more fame also pushed them further away from what they actually wanted to be. Inside the band, tension started building. Management kept members separated, worried they would influence each other in the wrong way. Media attention focused almost entirely on Alvin, which left the others feeling overlooked. At the same time, Alvin felt isolated by their frustration. No one was on the same page anymore. But the machine didn't stop. Records kept selling. Tours kept getting bigger. From the outside, everything still looked like success. But underneath, the pressure was building. And by 1973, the cracks were impossible to ignore. The band was still playing at a high level. The crowds were still showing up. But the energy that once drove everything was gone. What started as excitement had turned into obligation. And the constant touring wasn't helping. Imagine playing the same songs every night for years, while thousands of people expect the exact same experience every time. No room to experiment, no space to grow. For Alvin Lee, it became exhausting. He started pulling away, both mentally and physically. He later described retreating into what he called a wall of smoke, trying to deal with the pressure of being seen as nothing more than speed on a guitar. But the outside world was changing too. The spirit of Woodstock didn't last, and one moment made that painfully clear. August 28, 1971, St. Louis, Kiel Auditorium. The show didn't end the way anyone expected. Something triggered the crowd. It's still not completely clear what started it, but the situation escalated fast. Fans began throwing chairs, bottles, anything they could grab. Chaos took over the venue. The MC was knocked unconscious by a bottle. Police rushed in, but instead of calming things down, they made it worse. According to Alvin, officers arrived with guns, barely trying to control the situation, almost looking for an excuse to use force. It wasn't music anymore, it was conflict. And in that moment, it became clear how far things had drifted from what Woodstock represented just 2 years earlier. Peace, music, unity, replaced by tension, violence, and control. For the band, it was a turning point. They kept going, but something had shifted permanently. Then came the final blow. In 1974, they released Positive Vibrations. It didn't perform like their earlier albums. It barely made an impact on the charts. After years of momentum, things had stalled. And without momentum, everything else started to fall apart. After one last tour that same year, the band made a decision. No big announcement, no farewell show, no dramatic ending. They just stopped, quietly. Leo Lyons later said Alvin had been like a brother to him, But by the end, the constant tension had turned everything into a cycle they couldn't break. And just like that, 10 years after was gone. The band that had once been one of the most powerful live acts in the world disappeared without a headline. But what happened next is something most people never hear about. Because Alvin Lee didn't stop playing, he just changed direction completely. 1973, something finally broke. After the band ended, Alvin Lee stepped away from everything that had made him famous. No more arena pressure, no more expectations to play faster, louder, bigger. He went back to something simpler, music on his own terms. His first major solo project, On the Road to Freedom, showed that shift clearly. It wasn't about speed anymore. It leaned into blues, country, and gospel influences. The kind of music he had always cared about. And the people he worked with said everything. George Harrison, Ron Wood, Steve Winwood, musicians who valued feel over flash. At one point, during those sessions, Alvin picked up an acoustic guitar and started playing old Hank Williams songs. Simple, slower, honest. And in that moment, you could see what had been missing all along. But nostalgia has a way of pulling people back. In 1983, the original lineup reunited for a show at the Reading Festival. For one night, everything clicked again. They played Love Like a Man, Good Morning Little Schoolgirl, and of course, I'm Going Home. And for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed.
One more time, yeah, crowd going. See my baby.
They even recorded a reunion album, About Time, later in the decade, and toured occasionally. But it never fully came back. The chemistry was still there, but the time had passed. Alvin himself admitted later he preferred small venues over massive arenas. The pressure was gone. The expectations were gone. And that's exactly how he wanted it. But then came one final split. In 2003, the rest of the band continued touring under the name without him, bringing in a new guitarist. Alvin made it clear he didn't support it and would never rejoin. That chapter was closed. Then, on March 6, 2013, Alvin Lee passed away following complications from surgery. He was 68 years old, and just like that, the fastest guitar in rock history played its final note. But here's the strange part. Despite everything they achieved, 10 years after doesn't get mentioned the way other bands from that era do. They had 8 consecutive UK top 40 albums, 4 straight gold records in America, sold-out arena tours across 2 continents, and one of the most iconic performances in rock history. Yet somehow, they've been left out of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Even today, their legacy lives in a very specific way. That 9-minute performance, still watched, still studied, still talked about. Guitarists continue to point to Alvin Lee as an influence. His speed, his tone, his control, it all left a mark. And the band still exists in a way, with drummer Rick Lee continuing to carry the name forward. But for most people, 10 years after is frozen in time. A muddy stage, 500,000 people, and a guitarist moving so fast it didn't seem real. You thought that was big? Try this. For one brief moment, they were as powerful as any band in the world. And then they chose to walk away, not because they failed, but because they had enough. And maybe that's why their story still feels unfinished, because it wasn't destroyed, it just stopped.